So good evening, everybody. It's the end of the workday. It's actually beyond the end of the workday, and we decided we'd get together and do a pseudo fireside chat and talk about chicken processing law in the state of Texas. We do have a document in front of us, but we're going to have a conversation about it. We kept the document out for some of the specific terms that were required or that are in the law for HB 410, which is the chicken processing law. So let's start.
Awesome. So do you want to talk about a little bit about the background on on-farm poultry processing?
Sure. So prior to the 2019 Texas legislative session, the law for processing up to 1,000 birds on a small farm was controlled by the USDA. However, the state got involved in that and defined it a little bit further and made it more restrictive to small farms. So if you wanted to process 1,000 birds or less, you had to go out and get this customer guide, and the customer guide stated that you had to basically build a $40,000 to $50,000 inspected facility to process 1,000 birds a year or less. So in 2019, a group of farmers, military veteran farmers, got together and asked if we could push this forward. And I contacted FARFA and asked if they could get a bill sponsored to modify the processing regulations, and that became House Bill 410. It's also part of what people refer to as the PRE, or the Poultry Rabbit Exemption.
Okay, so as I understand it, basically there are federal regulations, and then Texas Farm and State Health Services decided to add some additional requirements to it, which made it extremely prohibitive to a small producer who's only doing 500 birds a year to even justify the expense of that, because it required a $40,000, $50,000 building to do so.
That's right.
Awesome. So basically what this is trying to do is kind of roll it back to the federal regulations a bit, as I understand it.
That's right.
Correct.
That's
right. So I want to talk a little bit of kind of some definitions, background a little bit first. The USDA exempt poultry processing. That doesn't mean exempt from all regulation. There are still some requirements that we have to meet for that. But it doesn't, it means that we don't have to have an on-site inspector, correct? Is that correct? Do I understand?
You don't have to have a $50,000 facility to process 1,000 birds. You do have to have a clean facility. You don't have to have an inspector, but you do have to meet the requirements.
Right, so we don't have to have somebody there inspecting every single bird.
That's right.
Is part of it as well. And so the other point that I is important, I think, to make is that anyone slaughtering or processing poultry for use as human food, including exempt operations, must produce a poultry product that is not adulterated or misbranded. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the word adulterated and misbranded a little bit.
Right. So Judith did a great job of defining that. I'll quote her statement. Simply put, a product is adulterated if it bears or contains a substance that makes it injurious to health, or if it has been held, packed, or produced under insanitary or unsanitary conditions. Misbranding refers to the label.
Okay, so if I don't label it correctly, or I don't know, call it something it's not,
Right.
Something to that effect. Okay.
Well, you can't.
Great.
You can't batter it, right? It's adulterated and you add a batter to the bird.
Okay, so like you marinate it or add spices
Right.
or something
Yeah,
like
you
that.
not adulterate it. It's not a
Raw product.
It's not the way that it comes from the farm.
It's not pre-seasoned, right?
It's not pre-seasoned.
If I was putting the apple cider vinegar in their water, I was pre-marinating it. Okay, so let's talk about some general requirements, including the labeling. So can you tell me what is a poultry?
Yeah, so that was a great conversation when we actually started working on HB 410. Many people had not gone out and looked at the regulations. They had not gone out to see if USDA or FDA or anyone had defined what poultry is.
What a poultry is.
Right. So chicken, guineas, geese, ducks, turkey are all considered poultry.
Okay. which is going to be important in a few minutes when we get into categories and limitations.
Yes.
So we're going to get to that in just a bit. So part of the USDA requirements is that, well, there's 3 separate categories, right? And part of that is specifically the category that we're referring to, which is category 1, and processing 1,000 or fewer poultry. That it's per farm.
Sure.
So I couldn't raise 1,000 birds, and then you turn around and raise 1,000 birds.
That's right.
I guess that'd be a big no-no.
That's a big no-go. So it's 1,000 birds or less per farm.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that 1,000. So I keep asking this question. Could I do 1,000 chickens and 1,000 geese and 1,000 turkeys? Is that fine? Or
No. So all of those are classified as poultry. So you could do 500 chickens and 100 turkeys and 100 guineas and 100 doves.
That's math. Wait,
Okay.
I think you're up to 900.
Yeah, and you could do
Any combination
of
of.
those to
but
reach your 1,000.
Got it. Cannot exceed
It's
1,000.
not 1,000 chickens and 1,000
All right.
turkeys.
It's 1,000 poultry.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
okay, perfect. So let's talk about part of the regulation is that we can only slaughter and process birds that we have raised, and I have several questions in relation to that. So we'll start with the equipment used for that. Is that something that I have to go out and spend a bunch of money on and buy, or are there certain regulations to that?
Well, we forgot our initial caveat.
No. Oh no.
We forgot to say that we are not attorneys. We are reading or working from a document that was written by an attorney, but if you have questions regarding this, go read the law, the
Right.
statutes, and get an attorney.
This
Now
is
that-
not legal advice.
That's right.
We are simply sitting here reading and interpreting legislation based on our minuscule amount of knowledge. If you have, if you're making policy decisions on your farm and you have questions, absolutely speak to an attorney about it.
Correct. The document that we're gathering this information from was written by an attorney,
Yes,
but we are not attorneys.
we are not,
So-
not even close.
That's right. So back to your question. Your question was, does the equipment have to be owned by you? No, it does not. So you can borrow that equipment or rent that equipment, bring it to your farm, do the processing, and then return it.
Okay, what if could say my friend Farmer Joe down the street, could he bring his 25 birds to my place and process them here?
No.
Okay.
Joe would have to take your equipment
Okay, so I could take my equipment over to his place.
and he could process the birds there.
Could I help him process the birds?
As long as he's processing it.
Right. Okay. But again, not that you would ever do that because you don't like loaning your stuff out, but
I don't like loaning things out that create a biosecurity problem for my animals, right? So if I'm taking it to someone else's farm, in most cases I would know that person and I would know how they raise their animals. Mm-hmm. So I would still sanitize it before it left their place and sanitize it when they got back to my place to make sure I'm not bringing in disease from his birds
Right.
into my birds.
and I'm not saying people are dirty, but it's just
It's safety.
smart.
It's biosecurity.
I mean, especially given the times we're in right now, it's
Absolutely.
that's an even much higher top of mind thing for customers, for everybody, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about labeling. Because
have to?
yes, because I had actually confused things in my head this last batch that we had processed. I put a lot more information on there than we technically needed to. Now, that's not a bad thing. I'm not obviously going to change it or redo it. It's fine. But there's a distinction to be made between the whole packaged bird poultry and parted out poultry. So if you're just doing the whole bird, The things you have to include in there is the product name, the producer's name, so like our farm name, our address, and then the statement specifically, and I'm going to read it exactly, is exempt P.L 90-492. And if it's sold by the pound, so it's just you took out your breast meat or your legs or your thighs, you have to put the net weight on the package, and you also have to put the price per pound. So if you're doing the whole bird, you don't have to put the weight on there, but I mean, obviously we did it because we charge $5 a pound, so we need to do that to figure out what we're going to charge for that bird.
Sure.
And then the label must also include the packaged on date, and unless it's frozen, a sell-by date. And we had some questions on determining the sell-by date, but we couldn't come to any conclusions on that. So
Yeah,
I was curious about how you determine the sell-by date.
Yeah, I think DSHS probably has some regulation on that. I mean, I would expect that the customer guide still exists somewhere out there, and it's probably defined in there what those times are. If not, I would reach out to an attorney for an interpretation, or reach out to DSHS and ask that question, right? I've actually had people who prefer it frozen. I've never actually had anybody ask for a fresh chicken. Right.
If they did, I would say no.
Right.
Because to me, that creates a situation, put too much potential risk. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily in anything I'm doing, but anything can happen in transit. I mean, we're an hour and a half from San Antonio. If they didn't have that properly chilled by the time they got there, that could lead to some problems. So I'm not even interested in creating that space. So we always freeze our birds.
Absolutely.
I will say that we did get our labels on Amazon. There are some really good sites with like pre-made labels. And all you have to do is put your farm name and address on there. And then you get a package of 100 or however many, and it's got it all right there. You just fill it out with your marker. Do that before you put it on the bird.
Yeah.
Ask me how I know.
After it's frozen, it doesn't work well.
No, it doesn't.
But those labeling companies have the requirements for what's required in your state. So
yes,
make sure that if you do buy labels, that it is properly meets the proper requirements for the state labeling law.
Yes, and like the ones that we got, they had the exempt PL 90-492 on there. They also have the safe handling instructions, which I think is really important.
I think it's required.
Well, it doesn't say anywhere in here that it's required, and I'm not legal advice. I prefer to have that on there for myself, the customer. Knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So let's move on. There's 3 categories in HB 410 that they talk about.
Yeah, but I think we can skip category 3 and 2. Category 2 is primarily for processing 500 or fewer rabbits, and category 3 is if you're processing between 500 and 10,000 rabbits, or between 1,000 and 10,000 birds. Basically, if you fall into category 3, see the USDA regulation, build a $50,000 facility, and get your inspector on site, because that's what you have to do.
And have fun, that is not what I want to do.
No.
So we're going to focus on category 1, which is processing 1,000 or fewer poultry. So some of this I'm going to read directly off the sheet because I feel like the wording is important. And we want to make sure that we get it right, and then we'll have a conversation about those pieces as they come along. So for farms that process 1,000 poultry or fewer annually, the Texas Department of State Health Services is empowered to enforce the federal regulations discussed below, but cannot impose any additional requirements. So one of the questions that we get a lot about this is, do we have to go and register anywhere to be able to process under this category 1?
No, you do not.
No registration required.
No registration required with the state.
Okay, but there are some other requirements that we
Yes,
need to meet, and we're going to talk about those.
Yes.
So can we, if I decide to do this, go into poultry processing, let's talk about who I can sell to. Can I sell to restaurants or wholesale? Can I do a co-op? Who can I sell to?
No, the regulation requires that you sell direct to the consumer.
Okay, so are there any stipulations to that? And I know, again, we're not legal, it's not legal advice, but I'd like to talk about some scenarios. Let's say I have another friend who's a farmer who only sells beef. He's got some customers asking him about chicken, and he contacts me and asks if I want to offer my chicken. Is that okay?
Well, as long as I'm the one that's delivering them, right? They're buying them directly from me. It's not a CSA.
So they're not paying that other farmer, and then he's paying you.
Right.
If it's a CSA, I go there on drop date, and I give them.
I hand my bird to them and receive payment.
Making sure that you're maintaining that supply chain, so to speak.
Right. You may be just using them as an advertising mechanism for your farm.
For getting customers for yourself.
But you.
Well, and for convenience too, really, I think.
Absolutely. But in my opinion, because I'm not an attorney,
right.
In my opinion, selling direct.
Should make a little sign. We are not attorneys. It's right here. It's real big red. We are not attorneys.
In my opinion, when it says selling direct to the consumer, to the customer, that means there cannot be someone between me and them. They have to know that it comes from me. It's handled by me, delivered to them in the state that I originally packaged it in, froze it in. There's no other chain of custody between that bird and the consumer.
Fair enough. But I know we had with the Texas Bakers Bill, there was something that came up with some changes they recently made. How I get those customers, how I get those sales. Can customers order my poultry online?
I don't know. I don't know if they can do that or not. First of all, you can't do interstate commerce. So selling online is kind of a problem because unless you control it and limit it only to Texas,
right, so you wouldn't ship it
kind of defeats the purpose. You can't sell it outside the state, right? It can only be sold in the state of Texas. So there's probably some regulation around that, and I don't know the answer to that. I would say direct to consumer.
So at a farmer's market is totally fine.
Right.
People come into your farm.
Right. You may have other requirements, like if your farmer's market is in the city of San Antonio, you may have market fees and things you have to pay or permits that you have to get from the city. But as far as you selling direct to the customer, 1,000 birds or less a year, you can do that. You can process them on your farm, sell directly to the customer.
Okay. Still some question about ordering online. Okay.
That's always a question.
Okay. So can't do wholesale, can't sell to restaurants, really maintain your supply chain.
Correct.
Basically. Okay. So I'm going to read the federal requirements word for word, and then we'll...
So let's back up before you move on. Let's go back to a scenario that I've heard.
Okay.
And it's another one that I would have to refer someone to an attorney for because it's really pushing the edge, right? So let's say you have a chef that owns a restaurant. The restaurant isn't buying the chicken from you. The chef is purchasing the chicken from you directly and selling it in his restaurant. So I don't know how legal or illegal that is.
La 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 la.
Yeah, I would seek out an attorney and ask that question, or call DSHS and ask them. But
do you feel like that kind of puts you on a radar a little bit?
I think it puts you on the radar, and don't ask, don't tell really doesn't fall into this, right? If somebody makes a complaint, he's in trouble, you're in trouble.
Well, that's just it. If the conversation is, I get it, we want to do this thing so we can generate revenue on our farm, but we have to do it in a responsible way. Sure. You have to think about the fact that if somebody got sick for whatever reason, however it happened, when they come to ask questions,
it's a defense to
prosecution.
Absolutely.
Right. So
absolutely.
You're going to do the ride and hope that you have a case enough to not get in real trouble about it.
And not lose your farm.
Right. So, that's the things I think about when we're doing this sort of thing.
Absolutely.
When scenarios arise.
Absolutely.
I am not interested in going to jail for some birds.
It's like the IRS.
Right.
I just don't want to play with the government.
Right, no. Okay, so the federal requirements are as follows. Number 1, the poultry grower slaughters no more than 1,000 healthy birds of his or her own raising in a calendar year for distribution as human food. So, sort of self-explanatory, but I've got some questions
Absolutely.
here.
I was waiting for this question.
So, calendar year, January 1st through December 31st.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a fiscal year, it's January 1st through December 31st. My question specifically relates to his or her own raising.
Yes.
How do we define that? I understand that we purchase our birds as chicks. They're 2 days old when we get them, and then we raise them until processing. But, I mean, what's that definition of his or her own raising? So here's my scenario, and let's see how you feel about it. Let's say I have a friend, Farmer Joe, who gets sick for whatever, God forbid, for whatever reason, and he can't raise his birds anymore. But let's say they're 6 weeks old. I mean, they're 2 weeks away from being processed. He can't do it, so I take those birds and I process them and sell them. Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. There's probably a stipulation in the penal code or in the old
in the federal guidelines.
Well, in the old customer guide or in the federal guidelines, right? But, I mean, in my opinion, we purchase chicks from a licensed registered hatchery. So that's a business. It's one phase of birds, right? That's a business. They hatch them.
Right.
So we receive them directly from the hatchery.
I mean, that's pretty obvious,
and we maintain them through their whole life, and we process them. So there's a complete chain of custody. I think COVID-19 created a space where that might be interesting. I mean, the supply chain's broken, right?
Right.
People are slaughtering birds and burying them in the fields today. Could somebody sell those birds to you
And feed people,
and they're ready to process tomorrow? I don't know where that falls in the regulation. It's an interesting question.
I feel like, and this would be my interpretation, not an attorney, if that bird has lived the majority of its life on your farm, right? So if technically it's 8 weeks to processing, if that bird has been on your farm for more than 4 weeks, I feel like I would be comfortable saying I raised that. But again, I'm not an attorney.
Yeah.
I am not.
I think it's a great conversation.
But I feel like it's something that could come up, especially like you're saying right
Absolutely.
now with the current situation. I mean, there's literally animals dying that could be food for people that because of something like this.
Right.
It's mind-boggling to me. So I'm wondering if some of those are going to change.
Well, and maybe they change some of the regulations for this, and it may go back to the way it is today, or the way it was before COVID. They go back to that. They may have lessened the processing requirements. Who knows?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like with cattle. They have a specific, like, if they've been on grass for the last 90 days of their life, they're considered grass finished. Right? So there's a day, right? There's a length of time that they can define that. I'm just wondering if there's something like that for this.
I think that's a great question that I'll go back to Judith and see if she can answer for me. Hello, Judith.
Please help. Melissa got me stumped. Okay, number 2. The poultry grower does not engage in buying or selling poultry products other than those produced from poultry raised on his or her own farm.
I love that one.
Do you?
Yeah, it's
Why?
funny to me.
Why? Because my example, like,
Yeah.
so, well, that was my question. Like, I couldn't just go over to Farmer Joe and grab his chicken feet and, like, buy those and repackage them for bone broth or like, dehydrated dog treats.
Yeah, they weren't, well, dog treats might fall under different rules because this is for human consumption.
That's true.
So you might be able
That's
to...
a whole other category. We're not talking about that.
Yeah, we're not talking about that. But for human consumption, no. They have to come from your birds on your farm. Okay. He's no fun. Number 3.
The slaughter and processing are conducted under sanitary standards, practices, and procedures that produce poultry products that are sound, clean, and fit for human food, not adulterated. And we're going to get into that a little bit further after we get through these. I'm going to read the rest of these and then we'll have further conversation. Number 4, the producer keeps records necessary for the effective enforcement of 9 CFR 381.175. And again, we're going to go into that a little bit further. And then number 5, the poultry products do not move in interstate commerce, which originally I said was pretty self-explanatory, but apparently it does bear some clarification because obviously what it's saying is your product can't cross state lines.
Yeah, but what if I come from Oklahoma into Texas to your farm, buy the product, and then drive it home?
Right.
I didn't make the sale of that product across state lines.
Right.
That person purchased it
In
Texas, and once they purchase it,
that's their
they're
bird.
responsible for it.
Right. So obviously, I couldn't sell to a customer in New York State and send them a chicken.
Yeah, sorry, Lee, can't send you any chicken.
But if Lee drove down here and bought some chicken and went back to New York, that's on him.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, so, excuse me, I apologize. Let's go back to the slaughter and processing are conducted under sanitary standards. The requirement that the poultry be slaughtered in these conditions, they don't have a requirement for a specific type of facility or equipment. That was one of the great things about this being passed, was that we didn't have to have that requirement. However, they do recommend that you have some basic sanitary requirements, such as cleaning and sanitizing services as frequently as necessary to prevent the creation of unsanitary conditions and adulteration of product. And a lot of these things is what we're going to discuss next will be mentioned in your sanitation operation procedure plan.
SOPP.
Did I do that right? Sanitary operating procedures plan.
Right, but there is one requirement. Absolutely one requirement. You must have potable running water supply.
Yes, which I'm sorry, but I can't even imagine trying to process poultry without a shload of water involved in the process. So, quick to point out though, in reality, these guidelines and all of this is complaint driven. So
yeah, you're not registering with the state, so they have no idea who you are unless someone
complains of there potentially being a problem.
Right.
So, you may be willing to take the risk on some things. I am not.
Yeah,
So we're going to base this conversation on how we operate and some of our guidelines and rules that we try to follow, or do follow, rather. So let's get into the sanitary operating procedures plan. So although it's not required, it's strongly recommended. It helps to make sure that you're following sanitary practices, protecting yourself and your consumers, your customers. And then if there is a complaint filed and they come out to do an inspection, they will utilize that to determine if you're actually following some sanitation procedures. That being said, I'd like to talk about, because for me, when I was writing our SOPs up, I went online and I had to pull down like 6 different examples of SOPs. And they range from, I set stuff up, I sanitize it, I take it down. I mean, it could be that simple, to we use sanitizer brand blah, 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 and we wash down every 5 seconds, and we wear only this type of glove. And I want us to be in the middle somewhere, because if we were to be inspected, I want that inspector to know that we have really we've been thoughtful about this. It is important to us that our customers are safe, that we're safe. I mean, I wouldn't just say we set up, we sanitize, we tear down. We set up our equipment. We sanitize the kill cones, the scalder, the plunker, the evisceration table gets sprayed down after every bird while the bird's being processed, and then sanitized in between each bird. You know, everybody's wearing gloves, either nitrile, latex, or
the heat-proof gloves for the
scalder.
Yeah, the temperature of the scalder is at 150 to 155
Right,
degrees.
that sort of information, and we empty the scalder frequently. Right. Because the reality is that in processing poultry, it's a 15-minute window from your bird's in a tractor where it could have rained, so it's covered in mud, or it stepped in some fresh poo, or, as you stated before, when any animal, human or anything, passes,
it loses muscle control. So if you didn't abstain food, it's going to defecate on itself, which is going to end up in your scalder water.
Right, exactly. So you're not a far stretch, for me it's very important, because you're not a far stretch from mud, poop, stuff to finished bird.
Right.
And to me, that it's very important that you're being safe with that. And the way I try to that in a second, but back to the SOPP. But I also don't want to be so specific that if I do get inspected, and let's say I mentioned a specific sanitizer that we use, and the store was out of it the last time we went, so I had to pick up a different brand, I don't get dinged for that.
Right. You're going to be dinged. I mean, they're going to look at your SOPP, and that's what you're going to be graded on. Now, if your SOPP, in my opinion, if your SOPP is we set up, we sanitize, we tear down, I mean, the inspector, it's open to his interpretation, and if he believes that you have not done a good enough job of sanitizing, that SOPP is not going to do you any good, and he's going to shut you down.
Right.
He's going to make you destroy your birds. He's going to make you do all kinds of things you don't want to do.
But also, by the same token, don't go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and restrict yourself.
Right.
Either.
It's kind of like the military.
Fine. Wait, what?
Well, yeah, in the military, you never give them too much information. You give them all the information they're asking for and nothing more.
That kind of sounds like a first date.
True.
Don't let them know how crazy you really are.
And in our case, we absolutely do the food handler's permit, right? We add that certificate. We redo that every year. We add that certificate to our SOPP so that they understand we know what the temperatures are. We understand what sanitizing means. We understand how cross-contamination works, all those pieces. So it's one of those things up front where they know, okay, you're supposed to be doing the right thing. Let's see if you are.
Right.
And then we do. We follow those procedures.
They know that. Just bottom line, if they see that you put that work in, they know that you care about producing a quality product. Maybe they don't care that you did all that work, but I personally don't care what they think. I want to do that for my benefit, for my customer.
Well, I agree, but in this case, if they got a complaint, they're coming for blood. They're not coming to negotiate. They're not coming to play.
You're absolutely right.
They're coming with an intent.
And I understand that. So my point is, find a middle ground. Don't go crazy, write a dissertation, and don't do a 3-sentence SOP.
I mean, if you want to, knock yourself out.
Right, sure.
You do what you want to do. It's your farm, your model.
Right. We're not telling you to go get a food handler's license anyway. That's just what our practice is. That's what we do.
That's right.
It also is, not that this is a marketing piece, but it lets your customer know that you care about your SOP. Imagine, the way I always try to think of it is, would I be comfortable with a customer coming to the farm and watching me do it? Now, granted, they don't want to see the kill cone part, but would I be comfortable with them watching me do this? Right? Did I maintain a clean work surface at the evisceration table? Did I make sure that bird didn't touch anything weird, or it had all its feathers gone, or it was rinsed completely, or all those things?
Went into the
I'd be comfortable with a complete stranger, not even like a family member or a friend that I've sold to before.
A customer.
A complete stranger customer came in and would be comfortable. I would be comfortable with her watching what I was doing.
Absolutely.
That's how I try to look at it.
Agreed.
So, that I think that's good on the SOP piece. There are examples out there. You can Google it and have fun, because you will end up in a rabbit hole. I promise. The other thing we talked about the food handler's license. Record keeping. That's what it was. The producer keeps records necessary for effective enforcement. So, I have a confession to make. I love a good Excel spreadsheet. I never met one I didn't like, unless it's got pivot tables and macros and all this stuff in it. But so part of the required records for the Category 1, the PRE exemption, is that you are required to keep records of the flock, so flock records, slaughter records, and records on the sale of poultry products. We're going to get into each one of those. So flock records. You mentioned something that you think that there are examples of these in the customer guide?
Yeah, I think there's examples of this out in the customer guide that they posted online that you could go get from, I just forgot the name.
Department of State Health Services?
Yes. HS. I think that it may also be available in the federal guidelines.
Okay.
But in my opinion, you're tracking.
So a flock record might be, so the batch that we received on, now I can't remember the date, February 11th, I believe. So it would be row 1 through 26, bird 1, batch 1, bird 1, and then date hatched, date received, and if you really want to go crazy, like I might, how much they weighed when they got here, how much feed they consumed. I mean, you could go on.
Well, those would be
details.
typical farm records.
Right. If you really wanted
standard
to
cost breakdown.
feed conversions and stuff like that, absolutely.
But also, that's why the hatchery writes the hatch date on the box.
So you know that.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's right.
So, okay. Okay, so you have like an actual number of days and can calculate your, okay. So then there's slaughter records, and I think this is where I'm not confused, but I'm not certain. Does the slaughter record have to be separate, a completely separate file, like Excel file? Could it be a separate tab, or could it just be a separate column on the spreadsheet where we put slaughter date, right?
Yeah, I think it would be easier to look at on a single sheet. I don't know if there's a requirement for it, where it has to be in a separate tab. But
well, you could put like slaughter date and say like we lost one in that first batch, right? So we could gray it out or put why it died, the air blew wrong because it's a Cornish cross, but and then
the temperature changed drastically, or committed suicide.
You know, it just.
So I think in our case we annotate in that cell why we think it passed away, because if it's disease. The requirement in there is that it's a healthy bird that you're selling to someone. So if it's disease, you need to know that.
Right.
And we need to know if the flock was treated. If the flock was treated, depending on what you treated them with, there's X number of days you have to wait before you can process those and sell them to a consumer for consumption. And in some cases, you can't.
Sid, I would rather keep all that data in one spreadsheet.
Yeah,
I think it'd just be easier. So I'd put like slaughter date and then weight, like your package weight.
Absolutely.
Right? And so for me, it'd be all in one. And so I'm not sure. Maybe I think that's another question for Judith.
It is all in one today.
Right. Do as we say. Just because it'd be so much easier to reference it. Here's my question, though. So, do you think you'd have to like put bands on every bird, or could you just label it?
Flock 1.
I'm going somewhere with this, like batch 1, right, and batch 2, because let's say.
I don't think it's a requirement, but if I'm bringing in different batches and different dates, I mean, that's part of my record, right? That's the chain of custody or the blockchain for that bird and that flock, right? And I think I know where you're going with this.
Well, my concern is that let's say I've processed 2 batches of birds, right? And they're all in my freezers out there. And somebody gets sick.
2 different flocks.
Right, 2 different batches, 2 different sets of birds, right? And somebody gets sick. And here comes the inspector.
Yep.
And I go out there and I say, I don't know. Well, if he's got to go, then it's all gone. Toss every last bit of it.
That's right.
And now I've lost even more money than if I had said, okay, well, these were all batch 1 birds processed on this date, and that customer got a bird from batch 1, so batch 1 goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still have batch 2 to generate revenue from.
Right.
So
he still has the ability to tell you to get rid of it.
I mean, he
anyway.
could. He absolutely could. But
odds are, if you've taken the time to
kept your records
and kept your records right and delineated that information out, you might be okay.
Yeah.
Because
I think
you can
that's
prove it. It shows
Right.
due diligence, right?
Right, so that goes to the last one, which is the records on sale of poultry products to customers. These are basically sales receipts, right?
Yeah.
But if you could even put on there pastured poultry B1, batch 1.
Yep.
Pastured poultry B2. That's all it takes. And just write B1 or B2 on all the birds when you process them.
Right.
I mean, that's
Because your record should denote the calendar year already.
Right.
So you already know what batch.
yes,
Right?
yes.
And you already know what year.
Yep. I think that's, you could do B20-1, right? So batch 2020-1, batch
Right.
1, batch 2, whatever. Just,
Sure.
but I just, maybe you don't have to, but why risk it?
Right.
That's my thing.
Right.
I'm always a little conspiracy person.
Well, it's due
conspiracy
diligence.
theory
It's not a conspiracy. It's due diligence. You've done the work. I mean, the whole purpose. We have fought animal ID. We have fought all of these things because we're not capable. We're not producing 10,000 animals a year, 10,000 birds a year, where they have to track all of the information. And we fought to make sure that we didn't have to abide by those rules and regulations. But if we have the ability to do our own due diligence and prove that we have followed all the rules, regulations, it gives them less ammunition to force us to meet the regulations required by those large producers, right?
And the thing is, I feel like when we go to have those conversations, we can say, it's not because I don't want to follow the rules.
Right.
It's because they're too cumbersome for my
Too
size.
burdensome.
But I can do this,
Right.
right? And it shows that I want to do the right thing and provide a quality, healthy product for
Absolutely.
my customer.
Absolutely.
But I can't do those things.
Right.
But I can do this, right?
Right.
And I think that makes a much stronger conversation when we go to the negotiating table when we're talking about these
But we have
laws.
to testify.
Right, and it doesn't just look like I'm some schmuck out back who wants to deal chicken out of his trunk or whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a gross exaggeration, but
Yeah.
that's my point.
Agreed.
We're not saying these shouldn't apply to us because we want to break the rules. It's because that's too cumbersome, but we could do this.
And it's too
that's-
costly.
Right,
I mean,
absolutely.
if we have to go down that path, it does. I mean,
What was the whole reason for doing this?
that's right.
Was,
And pastured poultry or poultry on the farm is one of the fastest forms of revenue that you can get. In 62 days, you can turn around meat birds and you're making money, right?
right. I mean, it's literally the easiest one.
I wouldn't say it's the easiest,
All
one,
right.
but it's the fastest.
Okay, again, here I am with the exaggerations. It is the fastest, and if you're just starting out, and I would say maybe with the least amount of wow, I just lost it.
Inputs.
Right. So you maybe build a $250 chicken tractor, right? You're gonna spend some money on some food because those things put away some groceries, but it's not like you're having to buy electric fence reels and all this stuff for cattle. And so with a little bit of inputs, you can start generating revenue pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
And that was the whole, I mean, really, that was a big driving factor for getting this law
Sure. I mean,
modified.
that was a big thing, right? So small farms, it's very difficult for a small farm to make a living or a profit off of a single revenue stream. So adding multi-species, multi-revenue streams to your farm, every little bit helps. So if you're making $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a year in poultry, it's could pay for the feed that you're picking up for your cattle or other revenue streams that require inputs,
layer
right?
feed or
Sure.
right, absolutely.
Sure, we have farmers that we know that pay for their entire feed bill for all species of animals on their farm, which is donkeys and ducks and geese and
Turkeys and pigs
turkeys
and layers.
pigs, and they pay
It's a
for
menagerie.
That's right, and they pay their food bill off of the sale of poultry. So it's a big chunk. It will help a farm out, and we really needed this legislation to get that done. And I'm so happy we got that done in 2019.
Yeah, it's fantastic. One other thing I wanted to talk about, because it's not so much with meat birds, and this is the Cluck Summit, not just Meat Bird Summit,
Right.
Is laying hens. Part of the reason we didn't go into a lot of detail about that is because that's actually still very much controlled by local municipalities.
Absolutely.
And even to the extent of homeowners associations.
Right.
I do know that in 2019 there were some bills that they were trying to get passed where the state was saying, no, you can't limit people.
Right.
Unfortunately, it didn't make it
It
through.
didn't pass.
So if you are looking to do layer operations, especially if you're inside city limits, even in your county, double check your location and see what the limitations are. I can say for certain that for San Antonio, the general limitation is 8, no roosters, but you can apply for a permit for additional birds. Again, that's just San Antonio. I don't know about anywhere else in the state. You will want to look that up wherever you are at.
Yeah, because there's additional restrictions to that. When you apply for the permit for additional birds, you have to prove the number of square feet that you have
Right.
and the housing for them. It has to be away from your domicile. It's got to be away
Yes.
from the water supply, all those
Yes.
things.
And then on top of that, if you live in an HOA or in a neighborhood with an HOA, the HOA can actually supersede the municipality guidelines. So please look into that. Obviously, we didn't have time to go into all of those for Texas, but certainly don't want to discourage you from looking into the legalities of laying hens, and also encourage you to get involved in the next legislative session to see if you can get that change to work for you. It can be done.
Absolutely, it can. And this was a great year for it. So I want to give thanks to Judith and the Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance for providing us their 1-page or their 4-page document on the legalities of House Bill 410. And there are some resources that we wanted to give you that are also provided by FARFA. It's USDA-FSIS guidance for determining whether a poultry slaughter or processing operation is exempt from inspection requirements. That document was produced in April 2006, USDA guidance on exemptions. And it's available at www.fsis.usda.gov.
I was going to ask if you were going to read
No.
all of that.
No, the other group is NCAT-ATRA. They have a small-scale poultry processing guide at https://attr.nccat.org/atra-pub-summaries. It covers the equipment needs, waste, product management, and packaging needs to get poultry meat to market, done by the ATRA Sustainable Ag Group. Also, there's Cornell University.
Before you run on, that does not address specific state and local requirements.
Right.
So
Right.
just a note there.
Cornell University has a 28-page guide focused on the 1,000 bird exemption at https://smallfarms.cornell.edu/resources/guides/on-farm poultry slaughter guidelines. It includes sample records and
Well, there you go.
sanitary operating procedures.
You know what's really funny is I know I've printed that out. I just haven't finished looking through it.
So we'll post these links in this video in the.
Sorry.
We'll post these in the description of the video so that you can get to these links if you need them. Thank you again, Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance,
Judith, we love you.
for pushing it all through and helping us through this. Yes, Judith, we love you very much.
Hours and hours of work. It's unbelievable, that woman.
That was a lot of days I spent there, and she
You
spent
did.
the whole.
You did, but not
She
as
spent
many
the
as she
whole
did.
session there. I don't know how she did it. Thank you all again for watching. We hope this helps, and if you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And if they're legal questions, please find an attorney.
Bye.
Have a great day. Bye.